Good evening to everyone joining us tonight. I am Professor Jeanette Groves, and we will be traveling with you, and I'll be facilitating the session for this evening. So this evening is a second part. We started last night already on advanced research methods, and this is the second part of the presentation. So welcome to all of you that attended last night, and maybe there are some people that is attending tonight for the first time. So please don't worry about that. I might be referring back to what we discussed last night, but just very briefly. And then we'll carry on with advanced research skills. So last night we spoke about advanced research methods, and tonight we're going to focus on advanced research skills. What I'd like to ask you is that you start engaging in the question and answer section from the beginning of the presentation. I would like the session to be interactive, and the only way that I can interact with you is through the chat section. So for those of you that were at the presentation last night, if you have any moments of truth after last night's presentation, or any awarenesses, any questions, any suggestions, then please start putting it in the section or the question and answer section. And once I'm done with tonight's presentation, we can then look at those as well. But I really ask you to please engage on that, so that we can have an active session. It is otherwise it's just a lecture, and it's not very satisfying either for me or for you. So please engage, ask questions, even if it's not related to the topic. You're welcome to post them, and I'll try my best to answer that for you as well. So with tonight's presentation, when we think of, I think maybe you did see the advert and you saw advanced and think, oh my goodness, I'm not advanced, so I'm not attending. But advanced research skills simply means that it is the skills that, so maybe let's start with basic skills. The basic skills are that you can follow the research process. So being the end of the year, I'm sure that most of, if not all of you, have been involved in the research process, either in your proposal or in your actual project. So that says to me that you have the basic skills. You could, even in your proposal, show evidence that you can follow the research process. So when we speak about advanced research methods or advanced research skills, it simply means that it's a bit more intricate in terms of methods, if you wanted to get involved in those, or some advanced skills. So tonight, what I'd like to do, I'm going to do a quick, really just a very short recap of last night, and then we're going to go over to advanced research skills and how we might develop that. If there's time left and you would like, I can go into some of the advanced methods or advanced designs again. But let us start with tonight's section first, and then we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to stop sharing my face and start with the presentation of tonight, and you know what to do on your side. So let's go. All right, so as I said, advanced research skills simply builds on the research skills that you have as basically following the research process. Now, last night we started off with Sanders' research onion, and we started in terms of the more advanced methods, and we spoke about our research philosophy and our research paradigms. Now, we started with that because it is on a meta level. It is abstract, and often I find that the students really struggle with the abstract parts of the research. So paradigms and paradigmatic assumptions is definitely a more advanced conceptual skill. And therefore, we started last night speaking about the outside layer of Sanders's onion in terms of research philosophies. We spoke about the main assumptions in any philosophical paradigm, and we also had some application. So that's the outside layer. We spoke about deductive and inductive approaches. Deductive meaning it's more from the positivistic side, and inductive more from the interpretivist or constructivist paradigm. And if you were thinking about mixed methods, the paradigm would be pragmatism, and there could be abduction as well. We quickly went through the different research strategies and what you could surround you with there. And we also spoke how you can advance in terms of your choice of strategies, where some strategies are just single designs and single data collection methods and analysis methods. But that within each design, you can also become more advanced in your choices and therefore build more advanced skills and methodologies. So we spoke about mono methods, multi-methods, and mixed methods. And then we also spoke about data collection and what data analysis might look like within these different paradigms. So if you didn't attend last night's section or session, please listen to the recordings, but that was more or less what the session was about. So part of the session that I didn't cover last night is more advanced or the newer research paradigms and methodologies, specifically decolonization and post-humanism, which is the post-qualitative turn. But we didn't go into that fully. So I will check what our time looks like, and we might engage with that tonight. But that's not the main aim of tonight's session. So let's turn then our eye or our gaze towards critical research skills. Now, for the basics, as I said, you need to be able to follow the research process. And any research process starts with thinking about what you want to do, thinking about your topic, thinking about how you're going to go about it, thinking about your methods, thinking about what problems could you potentially run into. So any research project starts with conceptual skills, and those are skills that involve your thinking. So on a very basic skill, we use our conceptual skills throughout the research process, very much so in the beginning, but then also along the way. You will use your conceptual skills again when you maybe design more intricate and more advanced designs. You will use your conceptual skills most definitely when you start analyzing and interpreting data. If you're a PhD student and based on your findings of or your results, you will use that to then develop your unique contribution. And that's another level of conceptualizing. You also conceptualize when you think about articles. So if I speak, you will hear that the thinking, the thoughts is very paramount in our entire research process. And they become more critical at different intersections of our research. So it is a very, very critical skill, and it's a skill that you have to keep on honing Some of us are better at conceptualization than others, but it is like any other skill, and you can learn to do it well. So within conceptual skills, the critical thinking is cardinal to any research project. And it is very important to have the ability to evaluate information and arguments in a balanced and reflective manner. So some of you might have attended previous sessions where I spoke about argumentation. So that is the ability to evaluate information, to critically evaluate it and make sure it is of a high standard, to critically look at what is the current discourses and arguments, and then have the ability to then have your own argument that would then be your thesis statement that you will try to prove throughout your dissertation or your thesis. So that's a very, very important skill. And we'll speak about it just now, how specifically you could hone these skills. It's also part of our conceptual skills is our problem-solving ability. And that's about identifying issues and applying systematic methods to resolve them. So it's very seldom that you will have your proposal approved and there you get going and everything happens exactly like it's in your proposal. If it does, then I'm very happy for you. But it might be that you run into problems at different stages. So your ability to identify these issues and manage these issues require problem-solving skill, and they are part of our conceptual skills. Then another part where we use our skills is when we develop hypotheses in quantitative studies. So developing testable and measurable hypotheses based on existing literature or observation is quite a skill that's quite advanced. So even for that, we need our critical skills. So thinking is very, very important. And I can very easily see that a student's thoughts are messy because then their writing is messy. So when your thoughts are messy and it's all over the place, your writing usually is messy and all over the place as well. So the better you can manage your conceptual skills and your critical thinking skills and integrate them, the easier it becomes to write them down in a manner that shows that you were critical in terms of your decisions or your application or your methods. So the next skill that is very important in our advanced skills for research is planning and design skills. So when we spoke last night, your research design, we spoke about your design falls within a certain paradigm, and that paradigm has certain assumptions. Now, your theoretical frameworks might also fall into this thinking mix in terms of where is your design going to fit. So in order to craft a robust methodology that aligns with your research question, you need planning and design skills. You need at the very least to know what is available in terms of designs, and not just be stuck with what you did in your master study or what your supervisor does. I often say it's like going to Pick and Pay and you want to buy rice. And when you're at the rice place where all the rice is out there and they're on the shelves, and you have to pick which rice is going to work best for you. So you would need to think, what are you going to cook? Should it be loose rice? Should it be basmati rice for a specific dish? But you are in front of that shelf and you have multiple rice products, and you would need to decide which one is the best suited for the meals that you're going to make. Now, the whole idea of last night and any research design training is that it offers you the opportunity to see what is on the shelf, and to use your design thinking skills to identify what would work best in answering your research question. So it really is all about answering your research question, and you need to plan and execute and choose what would be the best design for executing your research. You definitely need project management skills. I often find that students find it very, very difficult in masters and both their PhD studies to project manage. The reason for that is, as you come from your basic degree through your honors degree, it's usually a very structured approach. But when you get to your master's or PhD degree, then it is unstructured. There's no one telling you what are the D dates. In your proposal, you might need to give a plan. So you would need to think about your project management skills as early as your proposal already. And sometimes it's very hard to do that if you're just starting out, because you don't have an idea of the scope and what takes longer and so on. But the ability to project manage, to plan, execute, oversee your project from the beginning to the end is definitely a skill that is crucial to get to the end point of your research project. Then very, very important is your resource allocation. Remember, we said last night, when you are choosing between basic designs and more advanced designs, that time and resources are two of the most important factors that might come into play when you are planning and designing your research study. How much time do you have? Is it a master's where you usually have 3 years, a PhD 5 years? What can you do in that time? What is realistic? And also what resources are available to you. And resources is time, money, funding. A resource could also be if you are doing a study in multiple settings and you would need to travel there. So resource allocation is very, very important that you think about it from the very beginning in terms of time, funding, and I don't like the word manpower, just we could say woman power as well, but just having the resources to execute what you need to execute. So your planning and design skills are very critical from the beginning, but also while your project is unfolding. Now, the next place where your skills come into place and where you might need both of the previous skills as well is your data collection skills. Now, before you can collect data, you need to develop your instruments, whether it's a survey or whether it is an interview guide. You would need the skills to be able to develop your instruments. So crafting your questionnaire and survey so that they'll yield reliable data, or in qualitative research, designing your interview guide so that it aligns with your theoretical framework, for instance, and that it will answer your research question. So they've already, it is going beyond just following the research process, but it is the skills involved that you would need to actually design your data collection tools even before you go to the field. Now, in qualitative research, if you are using interviewing techniques, You would need to have the skills to be able to do that. And if you don't, that you are aware of that and that you can either get training on that, practice on that, but that you have some way of acquiring, very importantly, intra and interpersonal skills, and that you have this communication skills to be able to conduct interviews. Observational skills. Some of us are quite good at observing, and some of us might need some practice if we are using observational skills through observation. So these skills you can practice at home already. Your family doesn't need to know that you're practicing on them. You could, for instance, with your communication skills, if you read up on communication skills, and for instance, one of the skills is to reflect content, then in family conversations, you can say, okay, today I'm going to practice on this skill. And without your family knowing, you can listen for what they are saying, and reflect it back to them as part of a communication technique. Then the next night you take the following skill, and so you can start developing your skills. You might also want to have a pilot interview where you can practice, and then based on that interview, also sharpen your skills. So in terms of data collection, it is about the ability to design your instruments and then the ability to action them in the field that you would then need. When we look at our analytical skills, now our analytical skills comes in at various aspects of our research and not just with our data analysis. We need analytical skills before we can build, for instance, an argument. So analysis means alleen, and that means that we are taking things apart. And the next step, I find the students are generally quite good at taking things apart. But when it comes to the point where they need to put it back together again in a new whole, then they become flustered in terms of interpreting and really putting those analytical skills in terms of interpretation skills back to work in terms of generating new knowledge or findings or your results. So if you are using a quantitative design, you might need statistical analysis skills. Remember last night we said the different statistical analysis can also go from very basic descriptive, and it can build up to very, very advanced analytical skills. So you must realize that on a master's level, you don't want to go for the most complicated statistical analysis method if you don't know what it is. Definitely, a statistician can help you, but ultimately you need to write it up and you would need to understand it. So think about these aspects in terms of on what level you are. Are you on a master's level or are you on a PhD level? And I said last night, in a master's study, you need to show that you can follow the research process. It's basic research skills. And that's all you need to show. You don't have to have new things, develop new things, or change the world in a master's study. Basic skills is needed there. But on a PhD level, most certainly, you would have to have more advanced designs, more advanced data collection methods, and more advanced data analysis methods, and a new contribution to the body of knowledge. So in qualitative analysis, the same goes. A very basic qualitative analysis would, for instance, be content analysis, which is on a very basic level. When we look at thematical or discourse analysis, those are slightly more advanced techniques in analyzing your data. And then I spoke about data interpretation, drawing meaningful conclusions from your analyzed data. Now, again, with your interpretation, your conceptualization skills is very, very important. And I find with my PhD students that when they develop a framework or a model or a theory, there's a place after they've collected data where they need to interpret the results and develop something new, a new contribution to the body of knowledge. And that often takes them a number of months. So at any stage of your research where you need to conceptualize and analyze, you can, in your planning, project planning, allocate more time to those sections. So more time in analyzing your data than maybe collecting your data. More time to interpret your data and write it up than time in terms of analyzing. So the more we get in places of our research where we need conceptualization and interpretation skills, the longer time we need to allocate to those sections. So most definitely there is assistance for both quantitative and qualitative students in terms of their designs. But what I do find problematic, if the student relies completely on the statistician, or in qualitative research, completely on the co-coder, the ability to write up those findings is very, very difficult. And the reason for that being is, if you had a co-coder and you didn't code in a qualitative study or your own data, then that conceptualization comes from someone else. It is their brain that did the thinking and the conceptualization. So they might give you a table with themes, categories, and codes, but it wasn't your conceptualization. And then I find that it's very difficult for students to write it up. So please be involved. You can get help, but don't outsource these aspects of your research. It's going to catch up with you when you need to write up your findings or your results. But by all means, you can get assistance. The next skills we need is technical skills, and our technical skills is advancing at a tremendous rate, for the mere fact that there are more technical tools available. If I'm busy with a scoping review, and if I had to think how we did it manually, let's say 3 years ago, and the tools that's available now makes it about a quarter of the time, because the tool can do many aspects for you. So what skills you're going to need is your skills in terms of software proficiency. So it's a mastery of tools. If you're doing quantitative skills like SPSS, R, Python, or in qualitative data analysis software like UNISA subscribes to Atlas TI, and the current version is version 23. But there is also the possibility to use tools like NVivo. So your ability to work with these skills is developing your skills to work with the software is very, very important. And I always suggest that you start playing around with these tools as early on as possible. I find that it's very, very difficult for students if they're at the end stages and they need to finish up, and now they still need to learn the software before they can actually carry on with their research. So please develop these skills as early on as possible. and we'll talk about how you can develop these skills. But for now, the technical skills are critically important. There are so many tools available, for instance, to help you with your literature review. There are many tools out there. I'm just thinking of the Ryan software for scoping or systematic analysis. There is tools that help you with your writing. So there are many, many tools, and they are growing exponentially by the day. So your ability to leverage these tools are very, very critical, and to know where to use them for what. If you are working in a laboratory, your skills to use lab equipment and conducting experiments, but hopefully you might have had that in your undergraduate studies already. Very important data management, database management, storing, retrieving, managing data efficiently. If you're going to write articles based on your research, then the journals are now asking for your database management. If you are applying for funding, they will want to know how are you managing, where are you storing the data, how it can be retrieved, who has access to it, is it open access, is it not, which repositories are you using. So your ability to manage your data, also a very critical technical skill. Another technical skill that's often not talked about is the ability to format your final writings. Do you have the skills, for instance, in Word, to format, to outline, to develop a table of content for a Word document? Your skills in terms of working with referencing software. Do you know how to format your entire dissertation or your PhD study, at least at a very basic level? You can outsource it at the end and ask someone to do the technical editing for you. Some editors do it, some don't, and you might need extra person to do the technical aspects for you if you don't know how to do it. But at the very least, you should be able to do the basics. Then we also think about communication skills. So it is not just for those in qualitative research that's doing interviews, but it's also in terms of your academic writing. And it's very important. I always say that you can have the most marvelous research project and amazing data, but if you can't write it up in a way that the reader can engage with it, then it comes to absolutely nothing. So your academic writing skills, your ability to write your dissertation or your thesis, to write papers, articles, or reports that meet academic standards, to develop, for instance, PowerPoint slides for conference communication when you have a paper to deliver, for instance. Those all form part of your communication skills. And although people often say, yes, but English isn't my first language, I say that academic writing is no one's first language. We all need to learn it. And the only way that you can really develop academic writing skills is by writing. And the more you read other people's work so that you can get a sense of how they do it, until you have the ability to write in your own style and in your own voice. But it's something that you have to do. It doesn't just develop by sitting and reading, for instance. Reading is very important, but then writing goes hand in hand. So it's about reading, writing, and that becomes an iterative process. We've spoken briefly about our presentation skills. So that is the ability to also, other than just writing up our findings or our results, is the ability to do it orally as well. There's also a skill in how you present or how you develop a PowerPoint presentation. How many words should be on the slide? How many slides? If you only have 10 minutes, do you know how many slides you need? Just a short note on that. It's usually 1 minute per one slide. So if you've got 20 minutes for your presentation, you can look at about 18 to 20 slides. If you have 10 minutes, then you're not going to get through more than 10 slides. So you also need your planning skills in terms of that, and then your oral skills in order to present your findings. Then also very important under your communication skills is your ability to collaborate and network. And that's your working effectively in teams, for instance, or building professional relationships or collaborative research. We all need communication skills to be able to do that. Now, my skills in terms of, I don't have a problem with collaboration, but I have quite a huge problem with networking because I'm a huge introvert. So for introverts to go up and just talk to people is very often quite difficult. And I still find it quite difficult. I am doing better at it, but I definitely have to work at it. For others, it comes very naturally. And that's why I, for instance, enjoy the online platforms because it's just easier for me to communicate and collaborate in that way, and also then build networks. So very, very, I think of all these skills, probably your conceptual and communication skills are ones that is for me critically important and aspects that we really need to work at. Now, our meta research skills, and this is where people often get scared when we start working on meta levels, because it means it's more abstract levels. So meta research skills simply means that you think about your research skills. So on a meta level, it's thinking about thinking. I don't know how often you stand still and you think, what am I thinking about my thinking? It's quite important to do that. But we often don't think about that. So when we talk about thinking about our thinking, it's called reflexivity and not reflectivity. When we reflect, we think about actions, things, but when we are reflexive, we are thinking about our thinking. It's a meta level. So it's the ability to critically assess the quality impact of your research, including your own personhood. Also on a meta level, research synthesis. There are also more advanced design aspects in terms of literature reviews. A few years ago, it was a simple process. Everyone did the same. They read articles, they analyzed them, and then they would write up maybe in themes or timelines what they had read. Today, that's okay on a master's level, but it no longer suffices on a PhD level. On a PhD, it's kind of expected that you will follow one of the literature review designs, whether it's a scoping review, meta-analysis review, systematic review, but those are all more advanced designs, even in your literature review. So that ability to, for instance, have meta-analysis, analyzing the analysis. So it's not just analyzing the data, but now you're analyzing the analysis on a meta level. Systematic reviews, for instance, or meta reviews are reviews on reviews. And that takes on a meta level. And then also very big at the moment, open science practices. How do you sign up for that? How do you share data and any other open science practices? So what you might see if you're in qualitative research and you want to publish in some of the A-rated journals, you will see that they ask you to make your data available in an open access source. So you would still anonymize your data, but you would, for instance, upload your interviews. And so hundreds of people will upload their interviews on, and it will get labeled and sorted. And that simply means that if someone wants to do research on a specific topic, they can have a look if such data already exists, or they can combine it with their own. So those are open science practices in terms of data sharing, for instance. So those are more advanced research skills than just following your research process. Then linking to what I just said, we spoke about reflection and reflexivity. It's that self-assessment ability to reflect. What I would like you to do is tonight, after this session, do a skills inventory. After what we've spoken about in terms of skills, ask yourself on each skill level, do you have the skills, or what are the skills that you need? Do you have it or don't you have it? Make a list of these essential skills and rate yourself in each. Maybe you know how to collect data, but maybe there is a new way of surveying or a new way of doing interviews, for instance, and you might need a refresher. And it's a good thing to do it every so often, because things just move and develop so fast, even in designs and methods. And this will help you identify the specific areas that you might need improvement on, and you can then build that into your planning. So you would know, if I do not know how to analyze quantitative data, that very early on I would need to attend a training session on that specific way, for instance, on analyzing data, and you work that into your plan. Then also your ability to maybe consult and get feedback from your supervisors or academic mentors, could be advisors or peers, and their insight can provide you with a different perspective on your skills and the gaps that you might have. So it's very, very important in terms of, once we know what the skills is that we need, that we do a self-assessment, get a skills inventory, assess ourselves against that inventory, and then help, once we've rated ourselves, then help identify gaps, and then we can plan how we're going to upskill ourselves or develop basic skills if that's what we need. Another way that we can build on our skills is that once you have identified a skills gap, that you look for targeted training. So, for instance, if you know that you're going to use software, for instance, in a qualitative study, that you're going to need to use Atlas TI, then start looking early on already for training opportunities, where the skills can be demonstrated, where you have time to practice those, that you have develop a familiarity with the tools, the software, and that you are able to then build on your skill set. There's many online courses. Before we even get to courses, there are so many on YouTube clips and posts there that you can follow. It's as easy as Googling for instance, communication skills in research, and looking for YouTube clips. And there will be hundreds of those, and it might be as easy as simply looking at a few YouTube videos. That's really a short filler in terms of helping you. But there are also full courses online, Coursera, Udemy, edX. There's many research-related topics, and you can then complete it in your own time. So it's not always just about following the research process or following the plan that you had to execute your research. It's also about your self-development. And that's so critical, is to keep on developing and keep on with personal development. I joke this year I'm on research and development leave, and I have certain objectives that I need to reach. But it took me about 6 months to realize that it's not just research leave, it is research and development leave. So for the second 6 months, I really went very focused to develop my skills and self-development. So I studied in the summer. I studied at a university in the Netherlands in terms of specific philosophical interest that I had. I attended Atlas TI training, and so I really looked in depth at my own learning and development needs, because things move very, very quickly. Even your supervisors can't just say, oh, well, I did my PhD 10 years ago and I don't need any further development. Research is a very, very dynamic space and things change. You might find, if you're on a PhD journey, that what you thought about 5 years ago and what's available 5 years down the line when you want to submit might be very different. So please do this inventory at least twice a year, more frequently if you need to, but at least twice a year, so that you know what your development needs are and that you can address it before it comes to crunch time. Otherwise, it causes you a lot more stress. Then when we think about skills, how we can also be assisted is looking for areas where we can practically apply skills. So for instance, working on collaborative projects or joining a research team, or even just setting up a peer group where you can discuss and learn from each other. And also get, if someone has just collected data, they might tell the group, oh, I ran into this and this is how I managed it. And then if you get into a similar situation, you already have a practical example of how someone else did it. Now, a very important aspect is the aspect of pilot studies. And the whole idea about a pilot study is that it's a mini study. It's a mini research. It's not just, if it's interviews, it is not a pilot study, it's just a pilot interview. But pilot studies or pilot interviews is specifically put out there so that you can practice, that you can identify any gaps or identify any potential problems, and that you can sort it out before you officially go and do your interviews or your official study. So that's a very, very critical aspect, that we pilot our instruments, that we maybe also during that time, if you're qualitative research, also get time to practice your communication skills, see if there's any refinement needed in your tools that you're going to use. And the same with your data analysis is if you have no idea how to go about it, for instance, take one interview and sit with someone and let them help you with the practical application of data analysis. It's very easy when you write it up theoretically from a textbook, but it's quite something different to actually do it. So the practical application, there are times for that. Please don't skip that process where you can practically hone your skills and also then get a deeper level of not just thinking about things, but actually doing them. You can also get peer support and network support, something that I mentioned just now, study groups or peer groups where you can interact with your peers. I have a group that I run with my students once a month. We call it family meetings. They started based on the family meetings of Cyril Ramaphosa. And we now have these monthly meetings where I have a short presentation or one of the students present, and then depending on where the students are at, I'll ask a student to present something, for instance, how they analyzed their data or how they developed a framework or how it was for them the last few weeks before they needed to submit. And based on that, their peers can interact and they can learn from each other as well. So that peer support, if you can, I know it's a distance education institution, but most of us know about other students or have met them. If there's opportunity, see if you can't form a group. Many of these groups go on WhatsApp, and you can also share resources and ideas in those groups as well. There are professional bodies related to your field of research, so maybe think about those professional bodies and see if they have resource or training opportunities that can maybe also assist you. Then you can consult experts and use resources. So as I said previously, there are consulting services. Some universities offer statistical consulting services, writing centers. UNISA has a lot of writing retreats. There's also grant writing retreats. So please, if you've got data and you are busy writing it up, look at if there are any retreats advertised or summer schools, and attend these as a resource that can help you with your research skills. Then very, very important, literature, books and articles and papers. If you've been in any of my other training, I also always mention that when I was in my undergrad level, I think on honors level, a professor once told me she reads an article a day. And from that day onward, I made it a specific action every day. I read an article every day, 365 days a year, and I've been doing that for close on to, I think, about 15 years. So read. It can be in different formats. There's a lot of articles that's just a short read. You might find them on LinkedIn or ResearchGate, but your ability to read widely, not just in your field, but also read widely in terms of your research methods, your research methodologies, research designs, and the more intricate aspects of actually doing your research. So for the qualitative researchers, there's whole journals that only focuses on qualitative design and qualitative research methods. There you can learn what is the most up-to-date discourses. Remember, if you have a textbook, it's something that is often written quite a number of years ago, and and the UNISA students tend to use the older versions. So if you're starting out in your research, please invest in a research methodology book or research design book for yourself. And please make sure it's the latest edition of a book so that when you finish in 3 or 5 years' time, it's still relevant. But you have to augment your textbooks with articles as well that is more recent and more up to date, and that includes your design and methods, whether it's quant or qual. So please also then focus on that type of reading and not just about your topic. And then we can look at specialized training for advanced skills. There are certification programs. If you wanted to go that route, there are some advanced courses. And please don't think that you only have to do them face-to-face. There are amazing free courses. Universities like Harvard, Cambridge, have many open sources courses and certification that you can undertake. If you are applying for funding, try and work in that funding grant in terms of the resources that you need, the potential that you can visit a international university, for instance, like I visited and was there on summer school. Where I was studying under one of the greatest philosophers of critical post-humanism. And it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. I've got all her books, but what I got out from the time I spent under tutelage was incredible. It was really a life-changing event. So please, there are many summer schools in Europe. There's winter schools. There's also summer and winter schools in South Africa. The University of Stellenbosch often run these. So if you do have funding, or if there is opportunity for funding and you are writing up what you would like to have covered, think about this as well, that you build in skills development in terms of your funding as well, that you have the funds so that you can develop more advanced skills. Then very important, lastly, is getting continuous feedback and adapting. I know that, we often, when we submit something to the supervisor, it's like putting ourselves out there. And if it's full of track changes and remarks, and I know some supervisors are less kind than others, we take it very personally. But please don't see it as an opportunity to get feedback, because in actual fact, that's all it is. It's feedback. So start developing a thick skin early on. Don't take feedback personally, and it's all about development. So the review process, sending in chapters, or if you have written an article. I've had an article that's now been rejected 4 times, the same article. And I can either go and sit and throw it away, or I can keep at it. So I just develop a very thick skin. It's part, I just write it for another journal, rewrite the focus, see if I can improve it. And sooner or later, it will get accepted. So it's keeping at, even if you feel that you're not getting anywhere. And then very important is that the iterative learning. Your research skills are best developed through an iterative process of application, feedback, refinement. The same goes with your writing. Reading, writing, get feedback, refine, read, write, get feedback, refine. That process is never done. You will it won't even be done the day you hand in your thesis or your dissertation, because the examiners will still give you feedback, and you will still need to implement their recommendations. And then, if you've already done your articles, then maybe it's done. But it's not done until the fat lady sings, and that is even beyond the time that you submit for examination. So please be prepared for these lengthy miles that you will need to put in. Please be kind to yourself. The months before you need to submit, make sure you've got enough time, make sure you have enough energy. It's very, very tough the last few months before you submit. And I can tell you that, but you probably won't believe me until you're in it. But it can be quite an exhausting time. So speak to others, work in these things in your planning. Hopefully you've got some other ideas in terms of what you could potentially think about, that you can work in your planning and your resources. To help you through this process, not only developing your skills, but also developing yourself. And that's also a process that develops. So the person that started the master's or PhD degree is definitely not the same person 3 or 5 years later on. You've also changed and you've also developed. I can clearly see when I look at students' chapters, that how they've grown. Usually the chapters, the first few chapters and the last chapters look very, very different in terms of how they've also developed. And I can see a marked difference. And then, I can't ask them to go and rewrite the first chapter just because they've developed, but one can see it in the writing up. So that's more or less me for this evening. I'm going to just leave you with these last words, and that is to always remember that research is a craft, and one only gets better at a craft by doing it. And then very much the last question is a question to you. How open are you for new ways of doing research? So I'm going to stop with the presentation at this point, and I'm going to go to the Q&A just to see what is happening there, and then we can see how we are doing in terms of time, and if there are other slides that you wanted me to go back to, then we can most definitely do so as well. But for now, I'm going to have a quick squiz in terms of what is happening on the question and answer. So just give me a quick chance just to move to that section. And hopefully the quiet spaces that we have had last night is maybe more active this evening. And so please, if you have any questions or if you have any feedback, this is the one question is this a repeat from part one? I didn't attend part one. It's not a repeat. It builds on slightly on part one. But it is part one, we looked at advanced research methods, where tonight we looked at advanced research skills. So it can stand on its own, but there is also the recording of last night that will be available, and the slides include both yesterday's slides and the slides that I used for this evening. Okay, so please, if there's any questions, let's hear them. If there's any discussions, let's just check what you have to say. So please, I invite you to engage on the Q&A, and please, let's have an interactive session in terms of that. So I can't keep on talking just to fill the space. I need some interaction from your side as well. May we have the script of the presentation for parts 1 and 2? Yes, I'm sure that the organizers will have that available to you, like they have with all the other training sessions. You will get a link to the recording and possibly, I'm not sure the scripts per se, but the presentations and recordings definitely. So those are all the technical questions. Any questions in terms of the content? Silence. So either last night I thought that the level that scared people off in terms of the advanced methodologies. But tonight wasn't that advanced. So please, people, this is not a one-way interaction. Please bring up your questions, answers. Otherwise, I'm really just speaking to myself. So part of what we were talking about in terms of our skills, and if we talk about critical thinking skills, is that you are also develop the ability to critically reflect on the content presented and engage with the content. So this is your opportunity to practice, if you've listened, to engage with the content. Still nothing coming forth. All right, well then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the presentations, and I'm just going to cover one of the more advanced methods. Okay, so it seems like I was as clear as could be and that everything is well understood. So I'm not going to torture you with that any further. I'm then just going back to maybe one of the more advanced methods in terms of the decolonizing research. This is one of the more recent research developments, decolonizing research, and the aim here is that this research process is a process of conducting research in such a way that those who have suffered a long history of oppression or marginalization are given the opportunity and safe space to communicate with researchers by using their own frames of reference. So two very important aspects. So if your topic is a historical topic and it deals with oppression or marginalization of peoples, and you want to hear their stories in their own voice, then this might be a design that you could potentially look at. So in decolonizing research, we look at the application of methodologies and applying it in indigenous communities. Just some points on that. So decolonizing research methodologies in Indigenous communities necessitates a profound shift from the conventional Western-centric approaches. So the biggest thing in terms of this wave in research is that we are decentering the Western influence. Not saying that we are throwing it away, but that we are decentering the gaze from simply a Western gaze. So we aim to then center Indigenous perspectives, knowledge systems, and cultural practices in the research process. And some key considerations for applying decolonizing research methods in Indigenous communities are some of the following. So there's a definite ethical consideration in terms of aspects such as community consent. Are you able to, do you know, for instance, the gatekeepers? Are you able to get access to these communities, not just from the individuals, but the community itself? Your ability to be culturally sensitive. So the ethical guidelines must adapt to Indigenous cultural norms and practices. You would need to consider the methodological approaches. So some of the approaches that might work better in this kind of a research design is participatory action research. And this involves the community at all stages of the research, from planning to dissemination, ensuring that the research serves the community's needs. And I often say that we have a problem with research uptake because the community wasn't involved in the first place. So you can involve them even before the planning in terms of identifying the problem. So if they are involved at these very conceptual, in the stages of conceptualizing, you would have better buy-in and there's a better uptake of your research results. You could use Indigenous approaches such as Indigenous storytelling, oral histories. They are often so integral to the Indigenous knowledge systems, and they could serve as qualitative methods as well. Using local languages, Indigenous languages in research tools like surveys or interviews can be a powerful way of decolonizing research methodologies. So having your survey also maybe in an Indigenous language, or that you use Indigenous words to even decolonize your data collection instruments or your ways of collecting data. In terms of the epistemology frameworks, Indigenous knowledge systems, there's so many and such rich Indigenous knowledge systems. So please also consider them alongside Western frameworks. I'm not saying you need to throw out everything Western, keep what works, but we're definitely in a position where we can be more inclusive. Aspects such as the two-eyed seeing, this is an approach that combines the Indigenous Western scientific knowledge systems with Indigenous systems to give a more holistic view. So remember when I just started, I spoke about the issues of power inherent, and that's why we might turn to Indigenous knowledge systems, is exactly the issue of power dynamics. So community ownership, research findings should give back to the community, and they should have a say in how the findings are used and disseminated. And also then capacity buildings, the research process should then aim to build local research capacity rather than just extracting data. Then the role of the researcher in decolonizing research, very, very important. Self-reflexivity. Researchers must continually reflect on their own position and their potential biases. And also then, very importantly, the cultural immersion, that you spend time in the community to understand its social and cultural nuances, to really dig yourself into that. So this is just a short summary of what it might look like. So remember last night we spoke about the paradigms. So I just need a sip of water. So last night we spoke about paradigms and their assumptions. So decolonizing research is located within Africanism, the Africanism knowledge space. It works with indigenization, local perspective, local voices, local knowledge. And that the research process of learning and unlearning new ways of being. And then the decolonizing part is the transformative, corrective, and redressing aspects. So if you're interested in decolonizing research, or maybe at a later stage, there is a very nice chapter in the book of Fouchier, Stradum, and Rustenberg, Research at Grassroots, the 2021 edition, called An Afro-Sensed Perspective on Decolonizing Research Methodologies. Really a very, very nice read, easy read, but a very good grounding in decolonizing research methodologies. So that's just adding to some of the methodologies that we spoke about last night, and potentially one that you could also then consider or think about. Either in your current research, or if you maybe later would want to consider other research designs and strategies. So going back to the last words, this is, for instance, one of the newer designs, one of the newer forms of doing research, but you wouldn't know about it if you didn't read. Okay, so please, it goes back to identifying your skill set, finding gaps, finding opportunities to fill those gaps. And one of the biggest armor that you have with you is the ability to read. Please use the UNISA library. It's one of the biggest libraries in Africa. There is no excuse for you to say that you didn't have access, or you can't have access to the widest range of resources, articles, and available material out there that's recent and up to date. It really is a phenomenal library. So one of the skills I think that we can add is library skills. To visit the library, to make use. They've got a lot of training on different aspects, training on referencing tools, on doing literature reviews. There's an immense amount of training just on the library website as well. So there isn't excuse in terms of access. You definitely have access, so please make use of it, and that you can then develop your skills in terms of that as well. Okay, so we are back. The question and answer section. It seems that the session was informative. I'm just going to give it a few minutes to see if you have any questions. And if if I was as clear as mud as it would seem, then we can maybe then consider closing the session. So I'm just going to wait a few seconds. Any questions that you might have, even if it's not related to the presentation, it's your time to shoot. And otherwise, I think that we will then close the session. Right, so if there's no more questions coming up, thank you very much for joining tonight. I hope that some of what I shared is helpful to you. You can expect the slides and the session links that will be supplied to you by the organizers. So from my side, all the best. It's the end of the year. There's a lot of deadlines to meet, and all the best then for that last push in terms of your academic journey for this year. Keep along the line again. Goodbye.